Each spring, most Americans follow the shift into daylight saving time and move their clocks forward by an hour to get an extra hour of sunlight. Then, in the autumn, this practice ends, and once again, people turn their clocks back, gaining an hour as they fall back into standard time. It's an odd bi-yearly routine that billions of people observe. But in recent history, its practicality has been called into question. Already, 2 states in the U.S., Hawaii and Arizona, have abandoned the custom. Across the globe, less than 40% of countries employ the practice.
I think I'm joined by many people who want to stop the going back and forth because it can be really disruptive to people. It has health implications. It's just inconvenient.
That's Dr. Beth Malow, a professor of neurology and pediatrics at Vanderbilt University Medical Center and the director of the Vanderbilt Sleep Division. She says that the customary routine of springing forward and falling back is completely unnecessary and can lead to lasting health problems. So why do we still do it? To understand this question, we have to dig into how the tradition first took root. Some Americans have heard the narrative that daylight saving time began so farmers could have an extra hour on the fields. But this is actually false. The observance was put into practice during World War I as a way to extend the daylight for troops and save precious coal-powered energy. But today, this wartime mindset is impractical and dated. Yet Mallow says some proponents argue that the extra hour of sunlight is simply a nice perk during the spring and summer months. However, this bonus can quickly turn into a nuisance depending on where you live. She points out that the amount of light varies if you're on the western edge of a time zone compared to the eastern side.
If you think about it, that's where you're going to get the most light later in the day and the least light earlier in the day if you're on those edges. So if you're on the western edge of the time zone, let's say you're in Michigan and you're on Eastern time, you're going to have a harder time with the light than if you're in Chicago in Central time zone. Like I used to live in Michigan, and it could be light in the summer until like 9:30 at night. Sometimes even 10 at night, there'd be a little bit of light in the sky. So that can really wreak havoc when you're trying to fall asleep. And people have actually shown, people have done studies showing that you get less sleep if you're on those edges.
And getting less deep sleep each night is a big problem.
Getting enough sleep is important for immune systems. Getting enough sleep is important for our mood. There's so many different contributors that sleep plays in terms of health. So even cutting back on our sleep by half an hour can be very detrimental. The other place we see this is with our teenagers, because if they're having to get up for school really early, like 6 a.m. to get to school by 7:30, let's say, they're going to really struggle if they can't get to bed at a good hour because the light is too bright.
Mallow says that this increase in light confuses our body and disrupts our internal clock, or as scientists refer to it, our circadian rhythm.
There's a pretty strong evidence base now that we need morning light and to feel good, to wake up. It helps us synchronize our biological rhythm, so to speak. Believe it or not, bright light in the morning helps us go to bed earlier at night when we should go to bed because it just synchronizes our whole sleep-wake cycle. Now, when we have light too late in the day, let's say 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, it can cause us to not be able to go to sleep because the bright light can be really stimulating, similar to our cell phones, for example, right? We talk about the blue light from our phones. Well, this is actually even stronger. It's blue light from the sun.
It's important to note that this disruption of our internal clocks is magnified in the days and weeks after we spring forward into daylight saving time. For years, scientists have reported that there's an increase in the number of heart attacks, car crashes, and other ailments during this period. But Mallow says it's not only adults who are affected.
I take care of a lot of kids with developmental disabilities, including autism, and the parents will tell me that the kids just don't sleep normally after the time zone change. And it's not just for a week, it can be for several weeks. It's like their systems are just been thrown off kilter. And when they're not sleeping well, they can have meltdowns, they can be more irritable, they can have more aggressive behavior. So their brain's already vulnerable from their autism, and then you add the sleep problem on top of it, and you make everything worse.
With all that we know about the adverse effects of springing forward each year, Mallow says that part of the reason much of America still abides by it is because people are creatures of habit.
It is a challenge for people. I mean, I think that one of the advantages of going back and forth is you do get some extra light out of it at certain parts of the year. But I do feel that on balance, it is taking a toll on our health. But I think people who have to be somewhere, you know, essential workers, I mentioned the kids who have to be at school at a certain time. I mean, I really feel like for their benefit, we have to be thinking about the advantages of bright light in the morning and less light at night for those underserved, vulnerable populations.
As so many societal norms, from work to lifestyle, are changing post-COVID, Mallow says that this is a perfect time to rethink if we should continue springing forward and falling back each year. Is the extra sunlight in the evening worth the added risk to our health and well-being? Or is permanent standard time the way forward? To find out more about this topic and our guest, Dr. Beth Malow, visit viewpointsradio.org. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
Oregon's Tillamook County Creamery Association produces dairy products you know and love. In fact, the farmer-owned co-op makes award-winning cheese and is now the fastest-growing family-size ice cream brand in the country. Its commitment to stewardship informs every decision the co-op makes, and it's getting noticed. The company was recognized by Fast Company as a World Changing Ideas Award Honorable Mention recipient. And in 2020, Tillamook achieved status as a certified B Corporation. There are plenty more good stewardship examples in their newly released Good is Something We Make Together Stewardship Report. Here's Paul Snyder, Executive Vice President of Stewardship at Tillamook County Creamery Association.
When COVID hit, our farmer owners stepped up with a $4 million relief fund to help support employees, nonprofits, and local businesses in the communities where we operate. And we donated 10% of September profits to the Alpha Farmer Initiative to protect at-risk farmland and provide grants to up-and-coming farmers all over the country. We've also reduced water use, made advances in cow care, and joined the global fight against food waste.
The Tillamook County Creamery Association is owned by around 80 Oregon farming families and has been around for 112 years. Find out how they're a force for good in the world at tillamook.com/stewardship.
Cardiovascular or CV disease is the #1 killer of adults in the U.S., and millions of people trying to reduce their risk of a heart attack or stroke may unknowingly be taking medications that are not proven nor FDA approved to reduce cardiovascular risk. Let's hear from cardiologist Dr. John Osborne.
Many people are unaware that after a failed outcome study, the FDA revoked the approval of fenofibrates when added to statins, as the risk outweighed the benefits to heart health. It's important to remember that statins, along with diet and exercise, can lower cardiovascular risk by about 25 to 35%, but persistent cardiovascular risk, which can lead to a life-threatening event, may remain. I would tell anyone still being prescribed fenofibrates, such as Tricor and Trilipix, with a statin, to talk to their doctor about FDA-approved therapies for cardiovascular risk reduction.
To learn more and get clear on the facts, visit itscleartomenow.com. Again, that's itscleartomenow.com.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows. And find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints. Coming up next week.
The average consumer has got Angry Birds and Twitter and the news at the end of their fingertips on their phone. You've got to really present something that's worth taking them away from Candy Crush.
The modern craft of book editing. Then,
I don't have a boss. I don't have somebody standing over me saying, you've got to do this first, this, prioritize this, do this, do this. But the boss, how I think of it, is the music.
The balance of being a musical artist as well as your own boss. I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.